We can go ahead and get started, and hopefully he'll join us shortly. So I'll call to order the Election Commission meeting at 6:01. And for the record, we have Commissioner Terry Kish and Commissioner Raphael Workman with us. I'm Kristen Rosenbaum, City Clerk, and Tammy Yellico, the City Attorney. Commissioner Robert Moody is not here, and Commissioner Tutu Malatu is not here. So the second item, roll call, third item is audience participation. And this is on the agenda so that we can receive input from citizens, especially during this time when we're starting to do the ward redistricting. And so there's nobody here in the room, and I don't see anyone online. So we'll go ahead and move on to action items. The first item is approval of the minutes. And there's a typo on the agenda. It should be September 1st, 2021. But if there's a motion to approve those minutes, I would accept that.
I move.
I second the motion.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So the minutes are approved. And the second item on the agenda is ward redistricting process and criteria discussion. And so the purpose of this discussion is to provide an overview of the process and timeline that the Election Commission will use, and also the objective considerations that must be used by the Election Commission when creating its recommendation for the ward boundaries. So I'll talk about the process and timeline and public input opportunities. And then Tammy will talk about the objective considerations, go into details on those. And then we can talk about future Election Commission meetings. I'd like to get a couple additional meetings scheduled so we can get those in planning for. So tonight, we are holding our kickoff meeting. And throughout the month of July and August, we will have as many Election Commission meetings as necessary to review options and scenarios and prepare a recommendation that will be presented to the City Council. Right now, our City Development staff is working on some options for the Election Commission to take into consideration and an analysis. If the Election Commission has any
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you doing? Go ahead, have a seat. You need a hard copy?
I do.
All right. And for the record, Commissioner Robert Moody has joined us. And so just to catch you up to speed a little bit, we are talking about the process and the objective criteria that the Election Commission is going to need to take into consideration when adopting its recommendation and presenting to Council. Okay. And so we'll be meeting in July and August to take into consideration scenarios and create a recommendation to be presented to the Council. Our City Development Department is working on some scenarios that the Election Commission can take into consideration or provide feedback on. And the plan right now is to present the recommendation to City Council in August. And then if Council has direction for the Election Commission, we may need to have some additional meetings after that to take into consideration their direction. Okay. And then in September, the Council formally adopts by ordinance the new boundaries, and information would be sent out to the public, informing them of the new boundaries. Okay. So there will be public input opportunities. As you saw earlier on the agenda, we have the audience participation. And so information is on our website for residents on how they can attend the meetings, how they can provide public input, and when the meetings are, where they are, and all of the information that the Election Commission is receiving is also on our website. Once the Election Commission has some scenarios that they'll be considering, we'll post those on our website and push those through to social media so that we can provide or solicit feedback from residents. And again, once the Election Commission has a recommendation drafted, that will also be posted on our website and social media. So again, we can receive citizen feedback. And that feedback can be provided through email to the city clerk's office, and then those emails will be provided to the election commission, or they can attend one of the election commission meetings and provide the audience input during audience participation. Or of course, they can also attend a council meeting and provide audience participation input there. And if that occurs, I am at all of the council meetings, so I can relay that information to the commission. Before we move on, are there any questions about the process, timeline, public input? All right. Then to just orient you a little bit to our current ward boundaries, this is the map, so that you can see what we're starting with. And I'll go ahead and turn this over to Tammy, and she can.
Sure. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background here. The first is this entire process flows from the U.S. Constitution, the idea of one person, well, one man, one vote, one person, one vote. And it's filtered down through, based upon the census that's conducted every year by the United States government. And then it's filtered down through Colorado state law to our state legislative offices and our county commissioners. And then finally, it gets to where we're acting upon it through our city charter. And in fact, our city charter requires these 4 wards. It requires 4 wards, and it requires that council change the boundaries of such wards to reflect population shifts at least once every 10 years. So that's what our charter says. There are exceptions to that, but we're at a census point here, relying upon the 2020 census results, which were certified in 2021. And so that's why we are here now, changing ward boundaries as necessary. And they have to be changed per our charter within 180 days of the next regular municipal election, and that would be the election in November of 2023. So we are well in advance of that, and City Council would like to have the recommendations by the fall, if possible. So we're on a pretty good timeline here. Also very important to City Council, when Kristen and I first talked to them about this, was public input. And so to the extent we can push out the scenarios on our social media and get some feedback, or to the extent folks come to this meeting or council meetings, we really want to have that input into your process too. And so these are the existing wards. And you can kind of see the juicy spots where they intersect here up on this map. I wanted to talk to you a bit about the census. So these are 2020 census numbers. By ward, this lists the population. And there have been some changes, and I think most notable is you do not want to see changes in excess per case law in this area of 10%. So you can see that we have deviations, for example, between Ward 3 and Ward 1 of 11.13%. Likewise, we've got some fairly high between Ward 1 and Ward 2. You've got a 12.28 there. So total city population per the 2020 census, 141,942, and the average ward population was 35,486. But it's those large deviations that we're definitely trying to get at in this process. The guidelines for this process flow from law, and they are that though, they're guidelines. So we're going to use these principles we're going to talk about next as guidelines for your work here. And also the charter, actually City Council rules, says that council could add a guideline. So if council saw something they'd really want you to pay attention to, they could have added that. And we took the legal guidelines to them, and they did not choose to add an additional guideline of any sort for you to consider. So the first, this chart based on the 2020 census information leads us to the first guideline that we find in law, and that's population equity. So to the extent practicable, your ward should be pretty much the same size. Again,
within 10%, right?
Within 10%, that's right. And so you're seeing these deviations are larger than that. So we're going to have to whittle down for sure a couple of these wards in our process. So the very first guideline, again, is population deviations. You want those relatively equal. They can deviate up to 10%. We'd like to see that 5% above, 5% below. So that's the range you have from the actual population count per ward. So we got to tighten up for sure. It looks like Ward 1, 3, and 2 here for sure. So we'll have some scenarios, first of all, that kind of do that for you when we plunge into this. Now, other guidelines that we have to pay attention to per the law is no minority vote dilution or political gerrymandering. Now, this is an important one, and we have to look at minority voting strength, and we can't purposely dilute the extent to which a minority exists within an existing ward. So I think we'll be able potentially to give some numbers associated with that. And we'll also look, as we look at neighborhoods, et cetera, and equal out that population to make sure that we're not splitting up minority sections of any given ward. So staff can help with that too. But it's a very important principle as we look at this. And then groups of voters sharing common ethnic, racial, or religious background is what this is referring to here. And we can't purposely dilute the strength of those minorities when we conduct this process. So those are the first two big ones, population equity and no minority vote dilution. Then we go on to this one, no change shall operate to exclude any council member from office before the expiration of the term for which the incumbent was elected or appointed. So we can't change this so that a council member from Ward 1 no longer lives in Ward 1 but lives in Ward 3. So they have to remain in their same wards for purposes of this.
When was this changed? Because that's not part of the Supreme Court or the guidelines that we have.
You know,
Is that a local? Because
Yeah.
Because the last time we did this, there were some questions about that.
mm-hmm.
It just so happens that's, that would be a limiting factor, I think.
It is a bit of a limiting.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering is that a city?
It's a charter provision. So
Okay.
section 4.2 of the city charter reads just like that.
Okay,
No change in the boundary of any ward shall operate to exclude any council member from office before the expiration of the term for which the incumbent was elected or appointed. So, that it's a good point. I'm trying to think. Well, if these are adopted in 2022 or 2023 before the election, they're going to have to keep council members in the same ward that they currently exist.
yeah, we always try to, at least we have in the past, being sensitive to that, but sometimes it's.
Yeah. So our maps will mark that too.
Good.
Yeah, we'll make sure we call that out. But yes, that's a verbatim quote from our city charter. The next principle, where is this? Coordination with general election precincts. Yeah, so to the extent we can, we're going to follow the county precinct boundaries. As Kristen and I discussed this comes from state statute. And we think it's largely so that the county doesn't have to create so many ballots. I think that was put in there as more of a convenience issue for them, but certainly it's something we will try to minimize, not to put our wards in different county precinct boundaries, multiple boundaries if we can. Let's see what else. Compactness. This is an important one. Rather than allowing voting districts to have boundaries that snake around the municipality, the aim of the process should be to constrain the boundaries to the smallest possible circle. But there's a lot of different ways to measure compactness. So we want to give you some scenarios that meet some of these other criteria and then take a look back at these scenarios and say, is this compact enough? And have we kept this together? Because if you look back at the map, you don't have, distinct circles. You can see where they tried to keep things together. Right. But we're spread out geographically, so these are going to be necessarily spread out a bit. So compactness is an issue. Contiguity, no district can be completely separate from the rest of the same district. So they have to be together and touch each other throughout each district or ward. And then finally, preservation of communities of interest. So this one is an interesting one, and I actually have a law review article I haven't read in total, but I could share with you. It's interesting. This is a difficult one for the courts to enforce, is the principle in this law review article, because you're trying not to split up distinctive units based on culture, socioeconomic status, trades, demography, geography. So to the extent there are other populations within these wards, and keep in mind minority vote dilution is a separate and overriding principle here, but to the extent that you have maybe a socioeconomic group or a cultural group within a ward, you're supposed to try to not split that up. So, maybe an example, I don't know, is a group of businesses that are unique and culturally unique that have located together might be something to consider. I was trying to think of examples of that. But courts really, so a challenge on that basis is what the principle of this article I have says, is really difficult to prove that if you've otherwise balanced your populations and you haven't diluted your minority votes to a degree. So, but it's definitely something that we have to consider. And so we can talk about potentially in the various wards what kind of communities of interest exist. That would be a good discussion one night to kind of prepare for that and think about that. I can certainly send you this article. It's a little legal in nature, a lot of case law, but it's interesting because it's a recent review of this very issue and the court cases on it. So what's important for the Election Commission too, as I did my reading, is that you have to consider every single one of these guidelines. And we're going to have to put something in writing about your consideration of these guidelines and based upon your final proposal to City Council. So we'll want to say, how we how we consider population equity, minority vote dilution. Each one of these will have some text around it, which I can help you with, but certainly from our discussions, they should easily flow how we consider those issues throughout.
Okay.
So Kristen and I will take notes on that issue because we'll want to document that in writing our consideration of this. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover, is these considerations from the law. Again, they're guidelines. We're going to try and meet them to the maximum extent we can here in this process though. And then that's your slide.
All right, so questions about that? All right, so this is the shortest meeting we'll have in the next few weeks. I can guarantee that. But I wanted to try to get a couple other meetings on our calendars. And so I was looking at July 13th and July 27th. Those are both Wednesdays. I don't know if everyone here is available.
And Chairman, I apologize. I have left my phone at home. And so I can't commit right now. It seems like on the 13th, I will try to make all the meetings, but I'll let you know if I cannot.
Okay.
I believe on the 13th I may have a conflict. I'm
Okay.
also on the local licensing authority. I believe that's the monthly meeting would be that evening. The 27th I'm available.
So I know that July 20th is their liquor meeting.
Well, then I'm wrong and I'm available both days.
Okay,
There we
good.
go.
And Commissioner,
Oh, yeah.
are you good? Okay,
What time?
6 o'clock, does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Okay, so July
July 13th, what's the second one?
13th and July 27th at 6 o'clock, right here.
And will we be looking at some scenarios next meeting?
Yes, we
Kristen?
should have by the next
I
meeting.
was gonna ask if you guys wanted to see a couple I've drawn up already, or is it too soon for that?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So the only three I've taken into consideration so far is population, contiguity, and compactness.
Okay.
But I just wanted to show a couple of things that are similar to what we have already. And the first two, I don't know if you guys can see. One of them is basically just all the rectangles stacked on top of each other, horizontal and vertical, right?
Mhm.
And then the other one has, for some reason, there seems to be a left and a right designation in the current one.
Mhm.
And so if we wanted, if there's a community of interest or something else, if there's a reason it has to be left and right separated instead of, one above and one below, then, then those seem to me like a good way to do compactness and contiguity. I included in here, I pushed the boundaries up a little bit to make Ward 1 and 2 a little bit bigger. And I also considered there's a city development map showing a bunch of development happening up north. And so if we squeeze in and maybe even give 5% to 1 and 2 where there's not as much growth projected, maybe like an extra 2% or something, and then it will not get so far out. So anyway, those are just what I had considered so far.
Can you email those to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. One is very similar to one we had, I believe, 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
This one is one I actually tried to, dot every little one, because the one is just like the broad strokes, but this other one you can kind of see. I tried to actually make sure we're not just labeling all the cities, but just us. But it was a lot harder to do. But anyway,
Interesting.
Now,
so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're I'm done. Thanks.
And Chairman, if I'm correct, we have to only go by the numbers that we have according to the census. But we can't plan for that, but we can take that into consideration. And I think future growth.
That's right, but I think you have to rely upon for the population equity, the numbers from 2020
Yes,
census.
that's
You
correct.
do. Now, it can be considered, I believe, in other contexts, other of the guidelines, but primarily we rely on the stats when we go towards the current stats for population equity.
Correct.
Right, you're right.
Correct. Okay.
All right, yeah, if you can email it to me, then we can
Yes.
send it over and see what the populations equal out to and.
Other considerations through our staff, that's good.
All right. Item 5 is other matters. Are there any other matters to discuss? All right, then item 6 is adjournment. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. We're adjourned at 6:23.
And I will let you know about the dates.